He puttered around with the instruments and then sat down in front of the prisoner's chair. Give me your right hand, he said. Studying at close range, he added, I'm told you're a sculptor. You have nothing to say? Well, I know it. I can tell from your hands. A man's hands tell a lot about him. Take mine, for instance. You'd never take them for a surgeon's hands, would you? The truth is that I never wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a painter or a musician. I never became one, but I still have the hands of an artist. Look at them. I looked at them with I looked at them with fascination, Stefan told me. He had the most beautiful, most angelic hands I had ever seen. You would have sworn that they belonged to a sensitive, unworldly man. As a sculptor, you need your hands, the Gestapo chief went on. Unfortunately, we don't need them. And so saying, he cut off a finger. The next day, he cut off a second finger. The day after that, a third. 5 days, 5 fingers. All 5 fingers on the right hand were gone. Don't worry, the chief assured him. From a medical point of view, everything is in good order. There's no danger of infection. I saw him 5 times, Stefan told me. For some inexplicable reason, he was not killed, but simply sent to a concentration camp. Every day for 5 days, I saw him from very nearby. And every time, I could not take my eyes off of those hands of his, the most beautifully shaped hands I had ever seen. John Dawson finished his note and held it out to me, but I hardly saw it. My attention was taken by his proud, smooth-skinned, frail hands. Are you an artist? I asked him. He shook his head. You've never painted or played a musical instrument, or at least wanted to do so? He scrutinized me in silence and then said dryly, no. Then perhaps you studied medicine? I never studied medicine, he said almost angrily. Too bad. Too bad. Why? Look at your hands. They're the hands of a surgeon, the kind of hands it takes to cut off fingers. Deliberately, he laid the sheets of paper on the bed. Is that a funny story? He asked. Yes, very funny. The fellow who told it to me thought so. He used to laugh over it until he cried. John Dawson shook his head and said in an infinitely sad voice, You hate me, don't you? I didn't hate him at all, but I wanted to hate him. That would have made it all very easy. Hate, like faith or love or war, justifies everything. Alicia, why did you kill John Dawson? He was my enemy. John Dawson, your enemy? You'll have to explain that better. Very well. John Dawson was an Englishman. The English were enemies of the Jews in Palestine, so he was my enemy. But Alicia, I still don't understand why you killed him. Were you his only enemy? No, but I had orders. You know what that means. And did the orders make him your only enemy? Speak up, Alicia. Why did you kill John Dawson? If I had alleged hate, all of these questions would have spared me. Why did I hate John Dawson? Because I hated him. That's all. The absolute quality of hate explains any human action, even if it throws something inhuman around it. I certainly wanted to hate him. That was partly why I had come to engage him in conversation before I killed him. It was absurd reasoning on my part, but the fact is, while we were talking, I hoped to find in him or in myself something that would give rise to hate. A man hates his enemy because he hates his own hate. He says to himself, this fellow, my enemy, has made me capable of hate. I hate him not because he's my enemy, not because he hates me, but because he arouses me to hate. John Dawson has made me a murderer, I said to myself. He has made me the murderer of John Dawson. He deserves my hate. Were it not for him, I might still be a murderer, but I wouldn't be the murderer of John Dawson. Yes, I had come down to the cellar to feed my hate. It seemed easy enough. Armies and governments the world over have a definite technique for provoking hate. By speeches and films and other kinds of propaganda, they create an image of the enemy in which he is the incarnation of evil, the symbol of suffering, the fountainhead of the cruelty and injustice of all times. The technique is infallible, I told myself, and I shall turn it upon my victim. I did try to draw upon it. All enemies are equal, I said. Each one is responsible for the crimes committed by the others. They have different faces, but they all have the same hands, the hands that cut my friends' tongues and fingers. As I went downstairs, I was sure that I would meet the man who had condemned David Ben Moshe to death, the man who had killed my parents, the man who had come between me and the man I wanted to become, and who was now ready to kill the man in me. I felt quite certain that I would hate him. The sight of his uniform added fuel to my flames. There is nothing like a uniform for whipping up hate. When I saw his slender hands, I said to myself, Stefan will carve out my hate for them. Again, when he bent his head to write the farewell note to his son, the son studying at Cambridge, who liked to laugh and go out with the girls, I thought, David is writing the last letter too, probably to the old man before he puts his head in the hangman's noose. And when he talked, my heart went out to David, who had no one to talk to except the rabbi. You can't talk to a rabbi, for he is too concerned with relaying your last words to God. You can confess your sins, recite the Psalms or the prayers for the dead, receive his consolation, or console him, but you can't talk, not really. I thought of David, whom I had never met and would never know. Because he was not the first of us to be hanged, we knew exactly when and how he would die. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, the cell door would open, and the prison director would say, "Get ready, David Ben Moshe, your time has come." The time has come. This is the ritual phrase, as if this and no other time had any significance. David would cast a look around the cell, and the rabbi would say, "Come, my son." They would go out, leaving the cell door open behind them. For some reason, no one even ever remembers to close it, and start down the long passageway leading to the execution chamber. As the man of the hour, conscious of the fact that the others were there solely on his account, David would walk in the center of the group. He would walk with his head held high. All of our heroes held their heads high, and a strange smile on his lips. On either side of the passageway, 100 eyes and ears would wait for him to go by, and the first of the prisoners to perceive his approach would intone the Hatikva. The Song of Hope. As the group advanced, the song would grow louder, more human, more powerful, until its sound rivaled that of the footsteps. When John Dawson spoke of his son, I heard David's footsteps in the rising song. With his words, John Dawson was trying to cover up the footsteps, to erase the sight of David walking down the passageway and the strange smile on his lips, to drown out the despairing sounds of the Hatikva, the Song of Hope. I wanted to hate him. Hate would have made everything so simple. Why did you kill John Dawson? I killed him because I hated him. I hated him because David Ben Moshe hated him. And David Ben Moshe hated him because he talked while David was going down the somber passageway, at whose far end he must meet his death. You hate me, Alicia, don't you? John Dawson asked. There was a look of overflowing tenderness in his eyes. I'm trying to hate you, I answered. Why must you try to hate me, Alicia? He spoke in a warm, slightly sad voice, remarkable for the absence of curiosity. Why? I wondered. What a question. Without hate, everything that my comrades and I were doing would be done in vain. Without hate, we could not hope to obtain victory. Why do I try to hate you, John Dawson? Because my people have never known how to hate. Their tragedy throughout the centuries has stemmed from their inability to hate those who have humiliated and from time to time exterminated them. Now our only chance lies in hating you, in learning the necessity and the art of hate. Otherwise, John Dawson, our future will only be an extension of the past, and the Messiah will wait indefinitely for his deliverance. Why must you try to hate me? John Dawson asked again, in order to give my action a meaning which somehow may transcend it. Once more, he slowly shook his head. I'm sorry for you, he repeated. I looked at my watch. 10 minutes to 5. 10 minutes to go. In 10 minutes, I should commit the most important and conclusive act of my life. I got up from the bed. Get ready, John Dawson, I said. Has the time come? He asked. Very nearly, I answered. He rose and leaned his head against the wall, probably in order to collect his thoughts or to pray or something of the kind. 8 minutes to 5. 8 minutes to go. I took the revolver out of my pocket. What should I do if he tries to take it from me? There was no chance of his escaping. The house was well guarded, and there was no way of getting out of the cellar except through the kitchen. Gad, Gideon, Joab, and Alana were on guard upstairs, and John Dawson knew it. 6 minutes to 5. 6 minutes to go. Suddenly I felt quite clear-headed. There was an unexpected light in the cell, and the boundaries were drawn, the roles well defined. The time of doubt and questioning and uncertainty was over. I was a hand holding a revolver. I was the revolver that held my hand. 5 minutes to go. So 5 minutes to 5, 5 minutes to go. Have no fear, my son, the rabbi said to David Ben Moshe. God is with you. Don't worry, I'm a surgeon, said the mild-mannered Gestapo chief to Stefan. The note, John Dawson said, turning around. You'll send it to my boy, won't you? He was standing against the wall. He was the wall. 3 minutes to 5. 3 minutes to go. God is with you, said the rabbi. He was crying, but now David did not see him. The note. You won't forget it, will you? John Dawson insisted. I'll send it, I promised, and for some reason I added, I'll mail it today. Thank you, said John Dawson. David is entering the chamber from which he will not come out alive. The hangman is waiting for him. He is all eyes. David mounts the scaffold. The hangman asks him whether he wants his eyes banded. David firmly answers no. A Jewish fighter dies with his eyes open. He wants to look death in the face. 2 minutes to 5. I took a handkerchief out of my pocket, but John Dawson ordered me to put it back. An Englishman dies with his eyes open. He wants to look death in the face. 60 seconds before 5 o'clock. 1 minute to go. Noiselessly, the cell door opened, and the dead trooped in, filling us with their silence. The narrow cell had become almost unbearably stuffy. The beggar touched my shoulder and said, "Day is at hand." And the boy, who looked the way I used to look, said, with an uneasy expression on his face, "This is the first time." His voice trailed off, and then, as if remembering that he had left the sentence suspended, he picked it up. "The first time I've seen an execution. My father and mother were there too, and the grizzled master and Yerachmiel." Their silence stared at me. David stiffened and began to sing the Hatikvah. John Dawson smiled, with his head against the wall and his body as erect as if he were saluting a general. "Why are you smiling?" I asked. "You must never ask a man who is looking at you the reason for his smile," said the beggar. "I'm smiling," said John Dawson, "because all of a sudden it has occurred to me that I don't know why I'm dying." And then after a moment's silence, he added, "Do you?" "You see," said the beggar, "I told you that it was no question to ask a man who was about to die." 20 seconds. This minute was more than 60 seconds long. "Don't smile," I said to John Dawson. "What I meant was, I can't shoot a man who is smiling." 10 seconds. "I want to tell you a story," he said, "a funny story." I raised my right arm. 5 seconds. "Elisha." 2 seconds. He was still smiling. "Too bad," said the little boy. "I'd have liked to heard his story." 1 second. "Elisha," said the hostage. I fired. When he pronounced my name, he was already dead. A bullet has gone through his heart. A dead man, whose lips were still warm, had pronounced my name, Elisha. He sank very slowly to the ground, as if he had slipped from the top of the wall. His body remained in a sitting position, with the head bowed down between his knees, as if he were still waiting to be killed. I stayed for a few moments beside him. There was a pain in my head, and my body was growing heavy. The shot had left me deaf and dumb. "That's it," I said to myself. "It's done. I've killed Elisha." The ghosts began to leave the cell, taking John Dawson with them. The little boy walked at his side as if to guide him. I seemed to hear my mother say, "Poor boy, poor boy." Then with heavy footsteps, I walked up the stairs leading to the kitchen. I walked into the room, but it was not the same. The ghosts were gone. Joab was no longer yawning. Gideon was looking down at his nails and praying for the repose of the dead. Ilana lifted a sad countenance upon me. Gad lit a cigarette. They were silent, but their silence was different from the silence which all night long had weighed upon mine. On the horizon, the sun was rising. I went to the window. The city was still asleep. Somewhere a child woke up and began to cry. I wished that a dog would bark, but there was no dog anywhere nearby. The night lifted, leaving behind it a grayish light color of stagnant water. Soon, there was only a tattered fragment of the darkness hanging in midair on the other side of the window. Fear caught my throat. A tattered fragment of darkness had a face. Looking at it, I understood the reason for my fear. The face was my own. All right. So that's